This is Dorian, they, them pronouns. Okay, so I thought I would say some of my thoughts on the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie that I saw a couple days ago, for the first time. So, before having seen the movie, I think I just watched Dan Morel's spoiler-free review, which I appreciated because it gave me, forewarning going in. And I think I might have also watched E-Man Review's spoiler-free review, and then not much else. And then because I was kind of, forewarned that this movie would be heavily about, spoilers, all the spoilers, that this movie would be heavily about animal abuse, that I thought maybe I don't want to see this movie. So I did put it off for a long time. Alright, anyway, so I wasn't sure I wanted to see this movie, and yeah, the idea of what I had been thinking the movie would have been prior was very different, because I was, we waited years for this movie, and, maybe this movie was never even going to happen, with James Gunn getting fired and everything, and rehired, and all of that, and just waiting, and then, Endgame, and so, when I saw the first Guardians, I absolutely loved it. One of my favorite movies, not only of the MCU, but of all time. And then, when the second one came out, that was also really, really good. I sometimes I feel it's better, sometimes I feel it's less, sometimes I feel it's equal. It doesn't really matter. The point is, it's also really, really good, and also one of my favorite movies of the MCU. And I've watched those movies again since the theaters. Not recently though. I haven't watched Volume 1 or Volume 2 since having seen Volume 3 intentionally. So I'll circle back to that. So just my thoughts on the first two. They're kind of in the rotation of MCU movies that I'll rewatch on occasion over the years. And then I hadn't watched either Volume 1 or Volume 2, I think in recent memory. I think it had been quite a while. But the point is, I was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for Guardians 3 because I love these characters. I really liked all of them. And you're rooting for them, and then, I guess I kind of wanted to see something in the flavor of Guardians 1, of, all your characters just having a happy, fun adventure together and enjoying their new found family with each other, and then riding off into the proverbial sunset. And then so I'm really glad that I heard the reviews like from Dan Morel and E-Man, to be forewarned that the third one is not going to be that kind of movie at all, and it's going to verge on grim and verge on dark or verge on grim dark and be substantially about, Rocket's backstory and abuse. Like, because I had thought, and I wasn't even really watching the trailers, either, because I wanted to go in blind. But then at one point, I did see a trailer, I think because I was going to see another movie, so that's how I happened to see the trailer. And, but I think I only saw the trailer like once, and so I thought, okay, well, they're gonna maybe show a little bit of Rocket's backstory, but it'll be like in passing, as a reference. But then, of the two reviewers I watched, they're like, no, be prepared that is the movie. That's the substantial plot of the movie. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm glad that I was forewarned, and then I was like, maybe I don't even want to see this movie because I feel like it would be heavily, heavily triggering for me and everything. And so I waited and I waited and I waited, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to see it. And then a couple of factors were weighing in on, like, that I should see it. If you hear crazy noises in the background, that is my cat attacking this footstool ottoman thingy. Alright, anyway. So, okay. Yeah, Beast is fine. All right. Okay, so also, I'm glad that I saw Across the Spider-Verse first. Really glad that I saw that movie first. And I'll like circle back to that. So what factors weighed in to me finally deciding to go see Guardians? Well, a lot of it was like I had been thinking, especially over this last phase 4 and into phase 5, of like, I'm really done with the MCU. Like, I'm really done with the MCU. I'm progressively more done with the MCU. And thinking, okay, you know, Guardians 3 will be good. We all know Guardians 3 will be good. So I was already thinking, well, that will be where I put my personal cutoff. You know, that will be the last movie that I see to say goodbye to the MCU. And then after that, only go to see another MCU movie like if word of mouth is really good. So I was already thinking, well, that's going to be the last one I want to see. And the Guardians movies were some of my most favorite movies of all time and in the MCU. And I've been looking forward to this movie for years. Also, it's like the real thing was like you can't read a book and read all the way up to the last chapter and not read the last chapter. You just can't. Even if it's not the ending that you want, even if it's a dark ending, you can't just not read the last chapter. And then also, you know, to have a communal experience with other people. Because if I waited and I saw this movie, you know, even years from now or something, then I would miss out on the conversation that people would be having about this movie. And if everyone else is going through like a collective, I don't want to say trauma, but maybe collective trauma or a collective processing, a collective grief with the movie, you know, like with Infinity War, then you want to be part of that and contribute to the conversation and all of that stuff. And so I finally figured, okay, I'll go see this movie. But there was a couple of things that I did that I probably shouldn't have done, which was, and I saw this somebody in the comments I was reading, I think last night, was it like Ellenil or something? She was writing, or they were writing in response to Dan Morel saying like, "Thank you, Dan Morel, for warning me about the movie. I now, you know, this will trigger me, and I now know that." I will wait until on a day where I'm not emotionally fragile to go see this movie. And I thought, you know, that was a really thoughtful response from that person, of someone who sounds like they really know how to manage their mental health. And it's like, I wish I had better self-management there. You know, that's a side tangent, but, you know, I just, you know, talk open and freely about, you know, whatever rambly topics. So it's like, with that, I did wait on this movie and I did go in forewarned, but I did go kind of like at a day or a time where I was more, I guess you could say, more emotionally fragile, and like probably wasn't good to have layered some triggers on top of some other triggers. You know, for me it was the movie was a bit much for me personally. Although I'm gathering that maybe for the majority of people it's fine. But it just depends, I guess, on, you know, how sensitive you are to these subjects and stuff. So anyway, getting into Guardians 3, I guess I was just talking about why I would go to see it, and ultimately going to see it for those reasons, like I got to read the final chapter in the book, and also I am hearing from word of mouth that it is a really good movie. Despite or because of that, everyone is giving it like an A plus, like a must see, that it is a good movie, like possibly up there with Across the Spider-Verse. Not to compare and contrast, you know, different company, different subject, different everything. So, yeah, so anyway, reasons why to go see it. And then, I also wanted to kind of get my thoughts out about the movie before going and rewatching the first two Guardians movies. Because, like with lately, Top Gun Maverick and Across the Spider-Verse, you know, you have one experience when you see the movie in, you know, the first time, and that takeaway, and then you go home and then you watch the prequel. Like for me, I watched Top Gun for the first time because I actually hadn't seen the original Top Gun, and so it hit completely harder, and then it contributed to Maverick being even better, and both of the movies contributing to an even greater whole story. And then similar kind of vibes for me with Across the Spider-Verse of like I have one tremendous feeling fresh out of seeing the movie the first time, like my immediate takeaways, and then, you know, as it lingers and as I think about it more thoughts on it, and then when I go and rewatch Into the Spider-Verse, because I had seen that before, so I had some memory of that to add to my enjoyment of seeing it the first time, just not recent memory, but then watching it again right after, then that made me see it in a whole new light and lead to even more thoughts about it. So I feel like I will have one set of thoughts after seeing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, just in and of itself, like right now. And then, if I go back and I watch Guardians 1 and Guardians 2 again, knowing now how I know how it ends, would I see those movies in a different light? Would it create an even bigger, more complete, more satisfying story? And what I'm hearing through the pipeline of internet gossip is yes, even more so. Another thought is, do I think that the three Guardians movies were designed to go together from the beginning, like Lord of the Rings, or like possibly, I'm guessing, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse? My speculation, because I don't know, is I'm guessing no, like not as tightly, you know, because I think that like, you know, with Lord of the Rings, you know, they just did all three at the same time, and like with, I'm thinking with like Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse, I don't think they're making them all at the same time, but I get the feeling like the whole story is known from the beginning, so that each one can have this entire, you know, thing that all fits together by design from the beginning. So do I think that the Guardians are like that? I don't think so, because I think that, you know, James Gunn was thrown the huge curveball of, you know, the events that happened in Infinity War and Endgame, obviously. So there would have been no way to plan where 3 would be starting from where 1 was. That wouldn't be possible. So I don't think there's any way that that story could be fulfilling as a trilogy in that sense. And also, I guess you wouldn't really be able to watch, you know, Guardians 1, Guardians 2, and Guardians 3 alone, just those 3 movies, to get the full picture, right? Because you really would have to watch, and I'm just, like, now thinking, like, oh, I was just gonna watch 1 and 2. It's like, no, I really have to watch first Guardians 1, then, did they make any other appearance between 1 and 2? Then 2, then you have to watch Infinity War, and then you have to watch Endgame, and then you have to watch the holiday special. I don't think you have to watch anything else, but then you have to watch those 4. Yeah, for it to all make sense, I think. Yeah. So anyway, I guess I will get into Guardians of the Galaxy 3, having just seen it the one time, having not rewatched Volume 1 and 2, and what are my thoughts, and full spoilers, and all that kind of thing. Okay, so, well, speculations about what I think I might see when I go to watch Volume 1 and Volume 2 again, is I think that even though 3 couldn't have been planned when 1 was written, that it was still very mindful, very thoughtful of taking everything into consideration so that it really feels like a complete and three-dimensional portrayal of all these characters and where their arcs are. And I think that that would just become more and more apparent. Yeah. I'm kind kind of tired too. It's just low energy. Anyway, so for Guardians 3, I guess my overall impressions with the movie were very mixed. I concede that it's a good movie and it's a good final chapter, and it's, it gives all the characters good conclusive arcs. I would think, yeah, that you could say happy endings for their characters in a way. You could say that they're healthy, good resolutions to all of their characters. And what I've been thinking is like, this isn't the movie that I wanted, but it's an ending that makes sense. I think it is an ending that satisfies. But to put it this way, when I got out of Across the Spider-Verse, my immediate thought in my head was, I immediately want to see the next movie. Right now, I will stay in the theater and watch the next movie. And it got me excited, and it got me excited about movies, and it got me excited to see more stories. And, that's kind of the feeling that I had when I got out of, Everything Everywhere All at Once, of like, wow, this is amazing storytelling. And, Maverick too, like, wow, this is like really amazing storytelling. Like, I didn't know that movies could be like this good and this well done. But yeah, when I got out of Across the Spider-Verse, I'm feeling a sense of like joy and excitement and anticipation, and like, even I thought I had superhero fatigue. No, I just, I don't like bad movies and I like good movies, and it made me excited to see more and think about, wow, like Spider-Man really went up in the ranking for like, favorite superhero. It's really, I'm all excited. When I got out of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, my thought was, I never want to see another superhero movie again. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with the MCU. I'm done with superhero movies. I'm just done. And I didn't feel good, and I didn't feel happy, and I felt disturbed and angry and like just not good feeling, and like, kind of miserable. And the more I sat with the movie is like, the more I'm thinking it's a good movie. It is a genuinely good movie. But just no, I have very mixed feelings about the movie. So that leads me into the thought of, well, a movie doesn't have to have a happy ending to be a good movie, obviously. And a movie doesn't have to leave you feeling all warm and fuzzy either to be a good movie. I think, well, Schindler's List. Everyone agrees Schindler's List is a good movie. You're not going to come out of that movie like, jaunty, like, so movies can, have very different vibes. I guess I would say, in a general sense, I agree with a lot of having now watched, Dan Morel's spoiler review of Guardians. Hold on a moment. Okay, where was I? It's like, joys of having a cat. Yeah, cat just, had a hairball, so I had to take care of that situation. Alright, where was I? So, let's see. Guardians 3. So, alright, going into Guardians 3, and I'll just, oh yeah, when I got out of it, I just had all these, like, negative thoughts, like I was saying. What it was making me think of, kind of straight out of the theater, was when, like, here's why I thought, okay, here's why I never want to see another superhero movie again, and that's why I'm glad I saw Across the Spider-Verse first, because I think that if I had seen Guardians first, maybe I just wouldn't have had the taste to go see another superhero movie, and then I would have been completely missing out. But anyway, so what I was thinking was, if you take the subject matter of superheroes uh, lightly, then you end up with something like, you know, Eternals, where you're just shooting like CGI baddies. A million people have commented on this of like how at some point shooting random CGI baddies like in Avengers and everything is useful because you don't want to have any kind of empathy for the enemy. It's much more keep it light if all the if all the things you're shooting are just thingy things, just endless CGI goons, and you can make them even look kind of, disfigured and monstrous, and what have you. But I'm just thinking of in Infinity War, and they're crawling through the shield and everything, and animalistic, I guess, or but you don't really care. It feels empty at some point. If it's done well in certain ways, you can have these great movies like, Avengers and Infinity War, but at some point it can feel empty, like in Eternals, where you're just fighting like random CGI, random things. And then Eternals does mess with your head because then they speak and have sentience, and but then are you supposed to empathize with them? And then you're immediately back to thinking of them as like kind of a random CGI baddie or something. So the point is, like, when you treat the concept of superheroes lightly, then it can just be empty and like empty goons. But then when you treat the subject of the superheroes and what they've been through with actual weight, then you realize these are just soldiers with massive PTSD. And you see that with Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in Endgame, which I think that could be, that's definitely Oscar worthy. I mean, it's, you really see Tony Stark's struggles with PTSD throughout the whole arc of, the golden era of the MCU. But yeah, a lot, and I think that maybe in part, like other people were saying, that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 might feel more elevated because it's coming on the backs of so much shallowness, like with Quantumania and with Thor: Love and Thunder, which was the worst, and on and on and on. And it's like, it's not that Shang-Chi was empty, but it was kind of empty. For good or bad, it doesn't really connect into anything else in the MCU. And so that is giving it like a phase one kind of feeling right there, where it's just, like when you go from Iron Man to Thor, like there's no connection, there's no through, but then, it's teasing up for through lines that aren't there, or maybe, or we don't know yet, or, but still, it's a standalone film. It's not a bad film. It's a perfectly average film, but it does feel a bit hollow too, I think. And so anyway, yeah, that was my general take, was that if you treat it lightly, you get empty goons like Eternals, but if you treat it with weight, then it's about soldiers with PTSD, and really delving into that and really, giving that the weight it deserves. But at the end of the day, in that vein, after you've explored, or as you're exploring that, for stories, where do you go from there with telling superhero stories? Like, what's next? It's just going to be more of the same. Battles and fighting over and over and over again. it's almost like what more stories could you tell? We're done telling superhero stories. I guess that's where my headspace was going from that direction. But of course, you can always tell any kind of story because imagination is endless, and these are our folk mythologies, and we'll endlessly create them and reinvent them. It's like, how many times are we going to have another Cinderella story? And how many times, we tell the same stories over and over again, or we reinvent them and hopefully create innovative new ones. And at the end of the day, it's things like all of these movies, both Guardians and Across the Spider-Verse, have different things to say about what being a superhero means and what it means to tell a superhero story. Like, you could address, the PTSD of being in, like, war and conflict, and you could address vigilantism, and maybe, it isn't wise to operate outside of the law, or when is it, or is it analogous to, or you could address identity, your personal life versus your superhero persona. So there's endless ways you can key into, and obviously the comics go on forever with all sorts of amazing stories that you can tell. And when are we gonna get Silver Surfer, by the way? But anyway, yeah. So just vaguely, I'm rambling. Suffice to say that Guardians left me in a much more sour mood, and I felt disturbed and I felt unsettled. But that's the point. And I think it's like I keep comparing and contrasting the two because they're just out at the same time. But like with Across the Spider-Verse, the main question I think that a lot of people are discussing that may or may not hinge on their full satisfaction with the movie is the ending, and whether or not that works for you, or whether that only works as a part one of two. And can you be satisfied with this if we don't get any more ever? That is the question people are asking themselves with Spider-Verse, of like, does this only work if we get the third movie? Or if we never get the third movie, are we unsatisfied? And my personal opinion is, even if we never get a third movie, or the third movie sucks, it'll still be amazing and it won't detract from it. And I cited, like, Wrath of Khan, and like I think that Empire Strikes Back would still hold up. We would just remember it differently, But anyway, so the main question there with that movie was the ending. I think one of the main questions with Guardians that's going to hinge on people's, satisfaction with the movie is how, were its dark themes too much? Did they go too far? Was it not enough? Did it go just the right amount? Was it so far as to be exploitative and emotionally manipulative, which is the camp that I'm in? But I think that most people are like, oh, it was fine. So I think that's the main question with that movie. But yeah, so I guess general thoughts about the Guardians. In general, I agree a lot with what Dan Morrell was saying in his spoiler review of Guardians, was that there's a lot of, like, I don't want to say tone shiftiness, because tone shiftiness I think would kind of imply like a jarring contrast in tone, like you saw with like Love and Thunder. I think this was more overlapping tone shift. Like you have, dark, pathos, serious themes happening, overlaid with like cotton candy visuals and some jokes and some things. And so that in and of itself is jarring. And again, some people think that struck a perfect balance, and Dan Morrell was thinking it wasn't a very good balance of tone. And I was kind of thinking it wasn't a very good balance of tone. Like, I do believe that jarringness was on purpose. I've just seen it, like, when I think of examples of that I like done really well, I think of like a Dawn of the Dead remake with the horror of shooting zombies with like the elevator music. And some excellent horror movies do that really well with the pop music versus the violence on screen. And then I also think of Edward Scissorhands, where you have like the darker themes, and you have Edward Scissorhands like in contrast to the candy colored suburbia land, to make a point, to make a satirical point, which I think that this movie is trafficking in that kind of like Edward Scissorhands-esque jab at suburbia somewhat and everything. But I don't know if this movie really, it does feel kind of a jarring tone shifty thing, and it kept me from enjoying the like, oh, I'm supposed to laugh now, oh, we're having jokes now, because I'm still kind of processing the heavier, darker themes. Also, and maybe too, just subjectively, some of the jokes just didn't like land with me. Like, there's quite a bit of jokes about, making fun of people who other people perceive as less intelligent, and so just throwing that around a lot, like, oh, he's dumb, oh, I have one of those in the family, haha, oh, he's dumb, da 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 da, and then again, as if that was a bad thing, and using it in mockery and using it in jest, and all of that just kind of left a bad flavor in my mouth. But at the end, it kept me from too much distaste, because at the end of the movie it is resolved, as you would think, with, again, empathy of like, but again, it could have gone further, like, I think as, was it Jessie Gender's review, I think she was saying, Drax isn't dumb, he's just perceiving, things in a different way. He's not dumb, he's just being perceived by others that way, but that's not true. And then I would go further and say, we also should stop using the word dumb as if that's an insult, and as if it's a bad thing to like have different speeds at which you learn, so again, to disentangle all of that, I think part of the reason that it's a sticking point for me is that a lot of times, at least in my experience, if you're neurodivergent and you have a tendency to maybe not pick up on not pick up on sarcasm or not pick up on certain jokes, and you tend to take it literally first, that is one potential issue that you could have with communication or social cues or something. But just because you tend to like take this joke literally and not understand this joke doesn't mean that you have a lower mental capacity and a lesser speed at which you can learn, and that you are just completely imperceptive. But other people, often bullies, will conflate the two and think, because you have issues with taking a joke literally, oh, then ergo you must also have a learning disorder, and then, oh, I'm gonna bully you, and then it comes out as, you're so dumb, you don't get it, you're not there, you're not all there. And it's just people being bullies and also not understanding the complexity of neurodiversity. And you see this a lot in characters in media that can be coded as neurodivergent, whether it's Spock or whether it's Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, and so on. And like Sheldon in Big Bang Theory, like sometimes they seem to get it right, or at least approach it with empathy, and sometimes they leaned into like, oh, well, neurodivergent people are just assholes. They're just fucking assholes. But sometimes they handled it well. Sometimes they did handle it respectfully. And I think, and I haven't seen all of, I only saw like 1 or 2 episodes of Good Doctor. And I think now that we're coming into 2023, we're seeing more positive representations. And I think in the TV show Atypical, I think Atypical does an excellent job of that. So I recommend, the Atypical show. And, anyway, suffice to say, that kind of stigmatization, I think, was happening to the character of Drax, where I think when they originally introduced the character back in, the first Guardians, I don't think they portray this character as being quote unquote dumb, having like a lower speed of learning processing, and I just think they're just like, oh well, his species doesn't understand metaphors. Oh, everything goes over his head. No, it doesn't. I'm really tall. And so it was charming, and they're still respecting the character. And then I feel maybe at some point the character of Drax got disrespected more as like more buffoonish, but not as far as like, they went with, Thor's character, obviously. And so in Guardians 3, they do redeem Drax's character and give him more respect and give all the characters respect. But, my more take with Drax is that, like, in the holidays, like, he does seem inordinately mean, I guess was more my take, was like, he always kind of insulted Mantis, but I think it was really turned up a bit of him being disrespectful of her in Holiday Special. And then so you can see why, they're not seeing eye to eye. Like, he cares about her, but he's constantly kind of being mean to her, and she's realizing that. She's like, basically, like, you're not healthy for me either. I need to go my own way, But I don't know why they had him be that kind of mean to Mantis. But anyway, I digress. So the point is, I think that Drax just perceives things in a different way, but just because he doesn't get metaphor doesn't mean, so that's why I was uncomfortable with all of that. But yeah, they resolve it in the end with showing that, you're not, and it was a great line of like, you weren't born to be a destroyer, you were born to be a dad. Like, there are some really great lines in the movie, and, I think the best line, was Rocket to the High Evolutionary of, you don't want things perfect, you just don't like things the way they are. And that's a great line. That's a stellar line. That's great. So anyway, in general, to sum up, like, some of the jokes didn't land for me. I did like the resolutions the characters were given. I did think that it might have been bordering on the edge of, like, emotionally manipulative and exploitative a bit. It was a bit intense. One coworker described it as akin to, like, in the first Toy Story. Yeah, on some level, visually. But I think this is much darker than that. Another thing I was thinking was, if you want to see a movie about, like, the messaging about animal abuse, go see Secrets of NIMH. It's an excellent movie. It's an excellent book, Rats of NIMH. Go see that. That's really good. And I think it handles the subject matter more straightforward, better, more concise, and it's handled really well, I think. It's been ages since I've seen that movie. I should watch it again. So I've been telling people, go see Secrets of NIMH, and a lot of people are like, huh? And I'm like, oh, you're so much younger than me. How do you not know of this movie? It's a great movie. So anyway, that aside, Demerel didn't like how I think the scenes of Rocket were spaced out throughout the film and might have preferred it all in one bit. I guess I would say that no, I would prefer it as spaced out, as kind of a framing of the movie, and also it builds and builds the dread more to like cut off the scenes and come back, so I think it is more effective like that. I think, you know, it does get me thinking about the High Evolutionary, as a character in Marvel, and I don't know too much about the comics, but I wonder if, with this established now in the MCU, where all this could go, because I believe, like, in Wanda's backstory, although this isn't Wanda's backstory in the MCU, but I think in Wanda's backstory in the comics, she was raised, like, her nanny was like a sentient cow that was created by the High Evolutionary, I think, or maybe not, but like there could be more connections with the High Evolutionary as a through line in other MCU projects or something. I don't know. Um, I did like the visual effect of at the end when the High Evolutionary's mask, that little part is off the hook and it looks so obviously fake and it looks like rubber, and then you're just about to think like, man, that looks fake, but then that's the point. I did like that effect detail. Um, which answered a question in my mind that I'd had before, which is that, when you see Rocket gouging out his face, and then later and you see him, this part of his face looks perfectly fine, but this is the mechanical part. And, like, Rocket is clearly going for the face and not the back. I'm like, it just messed with me. But then I figured, well, maybe, he just got facial surgery on himself or something. Well, so that answered that question. But then it's like, I kind of my subconscious saw where it was going. The other thing was like, I already saw where the friend thing was going before they killed them. Like, I think a lot of people like did. Like, the second you see those animals, you're like, oh no. Obviously, because we know that Rocket isn't hanging out with these friends in anywhere that we've seen. So the second you see them, you know that this is just gonna be like, oh, this is what you're doing. Okay. And then so I'm starting to prepare for the worst before it even happens, and then my mind was imagining scenes worse than what we actually got them, because I'm as soon as as they're talking and as they're talking about their hopes and dreams, I'm just imagining gore in my mind of like what is going to be happening to them, and what I ended up imagining was more visceral than what did happen. But then what did happen was, still obviously got an impact out of me, even though I saw it a mile running, but anyway, as everyone was saying, the voice acting for Bradley Cooper was very, very amazing. um but yeah, so I guess that's all I really have to say for now. I mean, I liked, if I pick apart like little elements here, because other people, I don't want to just retread what other people have said. Like Jesse Gender's comments on high evolutionary and fascism were interesting and stuff, and people's comments on like the portrayal of suburbia and things of that nature. I don't know, like, one of the things I thought was interesting, I don't know if a lot of people have mentioned, was I liked the look of the orgo sphere, the organic sphere thing. I liked, like, how they had, like, what looked like, um, epithelial, like the tissue, like, I just like the design, like, the when they, like, kind of, take out that biopsy of dermis, and like you have like layers, or like in the background you see like the little like tissue like lining in the background, like or the cells, like I just liked the look of this kind of organic scape. I thought it was interesting, kind of um like, was it Fantastic Voyage, or like it was very cool. I liked, and that was kind of original. I thought I liked the look of some of the visuals they were going for there. Um, My first take on Gamora was a little off-putting because I was like, well, what was her direction? Just yell every line, just yell every single line that she has. And so it was a bit off putting for me. But the more I think about it and the more the movie sat with me, I've softened quite a bit. I mean, and I think like a lot of people like that uh, her and Star Lord don't get back together. You know, they like that, she is a different person. She doesn't have those memories. It's not going to be shoehorned in. They're going to, and it told a better story that he should, stop moving from lily pad to lily pad to lily pad. And so the ending resonated with me. I guess what bothered me more, it's not that I wanted Peter Quill to end up with Gamora. I didn't want him to leave the Guardians. I didn't want the Guardians to break up because I felt that they were their own found family. And so I wanted, after all of that, I wanted, Nebula and Rocket and Peter and like all, maybe all of them minus Gamora. I wanted them to stay together. And like how could you break up the band? How could, after all of that and all of that trauma? Well, I understand that Mantis had to leave 100%, and I understand that Gamora had to leave 100%. But I wouldn't have. I don't know. But I guess it made a point, and it made sense to resolve that with his grandfather and like look back on the past and go back to Earth and quit being a soldier in a war and like go back and have a civilian life and like so it made sense. I wasn't dissatisfied with the arc. It's just, again, it's not like the story I wanted to see, because you wanted to see all your buddies stay buddies and be together and ride off into the sunset. But you can imagine, that Nebula and Drax hold down the fort at nowhere, and that, Peter can be retired, but he can pop in, and they can, Rocket's out there, and they can all visit each other and stay in contact or whatever, what have you. So yeah, they all had nice conclusions to their arcs, I think. Yeah, with the end credits, if I don't think that they're going to make a movie featuring that cast of that group of Guardians. I don't think that they would, and whoever did it probably wouldn't be James Gunn because he's moving over to DC. So I don't know if I want to see somebody other than James Gunn handle the character of Rocket either. But if it was James Gunn and if they made a movie featuring that cast, I might see it. I think I would be that invested, maybe. I would be curious to see like another iteration of Guardians, but only if it was given proper treatment and not if they're just gonna like Thor Love and Thunder it or something, which I could see. I could see it being turned into a cartoon on Disney Plus, like those little I Am Groot specials, and like no, then I wouldn't watch that unless it was like hilarious or something, like the animated Star Trek, or I don't know. But anyway, and then the second end credit scene, the only thing was I think a lot of people were like, why did it say Star-Lord will return? That was the only thing, was everyone was like, but we're done. This feels like an ending. Why does it say that? So I almost wish it didn't say. Yeah, I don't think anybody wanted it to say Star-Lord will return on there. So it should have maybe said something else. But anyway, I guess that's about it for now. I mean, maybe I had some more thoughts, but those are the general thoughts. I would say that this movie it's definitely PG-13, but it strongly pushes that PG-13. It is very triggering if you're particularly sensitive to, like, well, who isn't sensitive to animal cruelty? But, some people are more or less sensitive to these things. I just found it particularly hard to get through. But very visually effective, very emotionally impactful, and like the cinematography of like how it was shot, like with the hand. Like I can't like people use that clip now a lot in their reviews and stuff because it's like in the trailers, but I can't even watch like that clip now. And like but I love how and that oh, that's another thing like even how the movie opens, I loved, speaking of like the cinematography, that the camera is moved down to Rocket's level so that you, the viewer, are that short and you move through the world at that height, and everyone is taller than you, and you're seeing Cosmo's butt, and they're putting the movie in Rocket's perspective, and that whole you're seeing it through his eye level, and that was a really nice touch. And I liked that, like, especially when you see the holiday special too, I like that the treatment of Cosmo is really interesting, and that like it's like Cosmo is a dog who talks, and you get that more so than like a dog who was put through high evolutionary treatment. But at the same time, the dog is not being like dismissed down to really, and is kind of treated like an equal like background character like the other characters, and like it is nice that the movie is really giving empathy to all the characters. It really gave Mantis like some of the best moments in the movie. It really finally gave Mantis like fair treatment. And and like the beasts, the big like I loved that moment with the empathy with her and the beast. And like the reason that the beast got like eviscerated in the opening I was gonna say in the opening to Guardians, I was gonna say the reason the Beast got eviscerated last time was because Mantis wasn't there, right? But no, that was the opening to Guardians 2, so Mantis was there. So never mind. See, I have to go rewatch it because I was thinking like, oh, the reason they killed the Beast before was because Mantis wasn't there to give that perspective. But if she was there, I guess you would just have to say that that was a perspective that she learned over time as she's coming into her own. So I was very satisfied with Mantis' arc, and how she was treated, and the empathy of the movie and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that about rounds it up. I think at some point I will watch Guardians 1 and Guardians 2 again, and then see if I have any new takes on, do I see certain stuff in a different light now, or could see more things that like the third movie was referencing, that maybe I didn't pick up on or something. But anyway, that's about it. It's a good movie with good endings, but it is particularly hard to get through, and it is a bit sad to put these characters to bed in like a way that's maybe different than you had imagined. But you can't be mad at it at the end of the day because they are fairly like kind of healthy conclusions for all the characters. But it did leave me thinking I don't want to see superhero movies ever again. So that was kind of my take on Guardians 3.